Hi there, I'm Eric, and this is my second devlog for the game I'm working on called Breakbeats. In this video, I'm going to cover what I was hoping to do since the last video, what I did do since the last video, what I learned in that time, and what I'm hoping to do next. I did that last video in August, and right now it's the first week of November, so there's going to be a fair amount in this video. But there's some real value in making these videos. It's a time for me to reflect on what I have done in the project so far. It allows me to show you what I have done and get some feedback from everyone who's watching. So if you have any feedback, feel free to let me know in the comments or by reaching out to me directly. So yeah, I'll likely continue making these videos every couple months. But let's get straight into this one. So, over the last couple months, I was hoping to complete a technical vertical slice of the game. I wanted to be able to play the game from start to finish, even if it didn't have all the content, or the levels, or look or sound particularly good. The point here was to make sure that all the basic technical challenges were sorted out. That was the main objective. I have had a secondary objective of getting the game ready for art and animation. I figured to do this, I would need to build some frameworks for how animations and visuals were triggered by music and gameplay events. So right, that's what I was planning to do. There are 4 major categories of work that I did since last time. Number 1, completing that vertical slice that I mentioned before. Let's just look at the game. You haven't seen the game yet in this video. Okay, so first off, you'll notice a scene transition as the lobby loads. The lobby itself hasn't changed at all. But now, let's load a level. But now you'll see a scorebar at the top of the UI in each level. It shows a relative progress with milestones that represent the stars you've achieved as you're playing. There are a bunch of other new things that you probably can see, but I'll get into those later. When you complete a level, you now get a results modal that tallies up your score and shows you how many stars you've achieved, shown here as PS4 button icons as placeholders. You can see here the results modal gives you the option to go to the lobby, to the next level, continuing, or replaying the current level. This score, of course, ties back to the lobby screen, and the score is shown there. Even though there are only 3 or 4 half-built levels, I can play the game start to finish. You can see your score as you go, you can unlock levels, really basic stuff. But it's such foundational stuff, and it needed to be done. So the second category of stuff I worked on is animation. And let me back up for a second. This project is a learning experience for me. In nearly everything I do, I'm learning a new technology. So this round, I spent a lot of time teaching myself Unity's animation system. At first, I thought the animation system was just super simple, but I wanted to get into it and understand how it works. After all the research and testing I did, I realized it's actually a really solid system and really key. So I decided I would move a bunch of my code-based animations into Unity's animators. This wasn't a super visible change, but it allows for more flexibility in how things are animated in the future. And it's really a best practice. If I bring somebody in who's experienced in Unity, they'll be able to work with the animation system instead of having to deal with code-based stuff that's not as flexible. So as I was doing this, though, I realized I would need to synchronize some animations with music. So this led me to institute a standard where all animations that have a tempo to them are made at 120 beats per minute, and then code adjusts their playback based on the BPMs of whatever song is currently playing. This brings us to major topic number 3, which was building this subscription framework. Let's say you have a song with multiple sections. And during each section, the song plays, and then it starts looping around, and it goes into this loop until the player meets some criteria. And when the player, let's say they break enough bricks, Once that criteria is met, the song needs to move on to the next section of the song. And that's all built. That's built and working and has been working. But now we need a visual thing to happen when that transition happens. The game should be telling the player, you did it. Hey, let's celebrate this little success that you had within the game. I'm going to show you an example. And it's really easier to show this in Tetris Effect rather than in some of my prototypes. Here's what it looks like in the first level of Tetris Effect. For the first section of the song, the animated seascape shows these rocks at the bottom of the ocean, some fish. Once the player clears 10 lines, which is their criteria for moving on to the next section, there's a splash of sound and particles, and the song transitions to bring in drums. And the background transitions at the same time to manta rays swimming in a seascape. And here you are in this new section of the song, and a new set of visuals in the background. Then, when the player clears 20 lines, the manta rays dissolve in a splash of particles, and a whale and a school of fish appear in the background. In addition to these transitional events, it also has ways of having objects subscribe to specific beats. Here at the beginning of the first level, you'll see that every square on the Tetris field blinks whenever the snare hits. And then later, during the whale section, the whale itself pulses in time with the snare. But let's look at how this works in the basic prototypes that I have so far. Here's Breakbeats. In this test scene, the spinning hexagon in the middle utilizes the beat subscription to pulse in time with the music. Every few beats, there's also an on-beat screen shake, and that's the camera being animated. In addition, when the player breaks enough bricks, the song transitions, and you get these 70s colored bars coming down, and those are triggered by the transition when the song says, hey, we're going from one section to the next. So my prototypes are significantly less compelling than seeing Tetris Effect in action, but the mechanisms I've created should be able to be used to create pretty much the exact same results. So that brings us to topic 4 of the things that I've done since last time, and that's prototyping and learning. In addition to changes within the game, I spent a fair amount of time learning new techniques within Unity. Here's just a quick rundown of some of the stuff that I've worked on since last time. Particle systems. Yeah, I played with the particle system. Here's a bunch of examples. I think these are going to be important. You can see Tetris Effect use them quite a lot. I think it fits the aesthetics of what I'm aiming for, so I think it's a good fit. Camera, post-processing effects. I played around with these post-processing effects. They might be useful, they might not. I just wanted to get an idea of what's possible. Shader graphs. Yep, I played around with shader graphs. I have a feeling I'll be digging into these a ton in the future. I spent a very small amount of time just learning the basics. Physics. I'd never really done a serious deep dive into how Unity's physics engine works, so I built some prototypes that could tell me what its limitations were, where I'll see errors and unexpected behavior, how it functions under different... There are a bunch of switches within the physics system that I can turn on and off. And I also, regarding physics, made a bowling game. Yeah, I spent like a week building a bowling game. I ended up learning a bunch about the physics system in that. It was kind of a fun little diversion that taught me a lot about, well, reproducing reality in a game engine, but also how the physics engine works and how accurate it is and how much of a sort of a fake out it is. The other thing that I did that's kind of prototyping and learning is art direction research. The work I've done here was mostly just gathering examples of material that might help anyone I work with get a grasp on the intended feel of the game. I know I want this game to have an 80s feel, and I'm pretty set on synthwave music being the foundation of the entire feel. Thankfully, there's a set of aesthetics that accompany synthwave. There's that outrun sunset with the palm trees. There are neon colors and the laser grid and the general glow of most light sources. These are like tropes of the synthwave look. Anyway, I spent time trying to do the work that an art director would do. And while I'm not going to be an art director anywhere anytime soon, I learned the value of a dedicated art director. And I think that was very helpful. So that more or less covers the stuff that I did since the last video. If there are things that I should be working on that I'm not working on, if you see this game and you say, hey, I like the fact that it does X, but what if it did Y? That would be great to hear. I like that sort of feedback. If there is something that you expect this game to do that you don't see it doing today in the limited demos that I've shown, I love that too. Like, any sort of feedback helps me understand what others expect. At its core, this is a very old game. Breakout is from 1977, I believe. And I'm just updating a very old game, but hopefully I could do something a little bit new with it. One of the purposes of making these videos is to stop and appreciate the work I've completed. I clearly haven't finished this game, but I do have to say that I'm proud of the work that I've done thus far. I've moved things forward. I feel more confident in the game, in my achievements. I feel comfortable with the tools a little bit more and just the concepts within game development and game design. But the act of stopping and appreciating what has been done, I think that's a great motivator. I learned this really from watching Adam Savage's one-day builds. There's always a moment in the middle of one of his builds where he stops and he looks at the objects he's building. He takes it all in and truly appreciates the accomplishment thus far. It doesn't have to be done. In fact, it never is done. This is in the middle of the build. He's stopping in the middle and looking at what he has thus far, and he's saying, I like this. I like where this is going. This is going in the right direction. And I think without this capacity to appreciate one's own work, I doubt that Adam would be as successful of a maker. He's a wonderful person to watch build, but he's also somebody who has built hundreds, maybe probably thousands of objects in his life, and he's constantly motivated to do it again. I think I need to recognize a key fact of this project. I am both learning new tools and techniques and building a product at the same time. As a result, the build is taking longer than I originally thought. And I have to say, I don't have a specific deadline in mind, and I never really did. But when I started, I thought this project was small. Smaller than it truly is. There's a good reason major games slip their schedules, and that reason is uncertainty. There's another fellow, Rami Ismail. He said this very well. Making a game is not going from point A to point B. It's going from point A to question mark. The game creation process is a conversation with that game. It is inherently full of uncertainty. And for me, there's an added uncertainty in the process of learning the tools and the rules of the trade. My understanding of this game and the scope of this game has changed since I started. If my expectations were too rigid, I would have cracked as soon as my expectations couldn't be met by either the timeline or the technology or my abilities. I couldn't do this if my expectations were too rigid. Instead, I have to do my best to be flexible and accept that things are going to change. And this brings me to another important topic, and that is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Anytime you're learning a new thing, like a new big topic, the very, very beginning, you think, I know nothing. And then like a month in, you think, wow, I can do this. And your confidence builds. Maybe you do some small thing, and it really makes you think, oh, I understand this. And another month in, you think, I understand how to do anything. But you're like 2 or 3 months in. Why should you have so much confidence? And this illusion of believing that your skill and your knowledge are greater than they actually are was studied by a pair of psychologists named Dunning and Kruger in the late 90s. And it's represented in this graph. And I too have fallen prey to this effect. At the beginning of making this game, I thought, I am confident I can do this. This is a slam dunk of a project. I should not have had so much confidence. I've never built a game before. Not like this. I've built game jam games. I've done small little side projects. I've done small things. But I haven't done this. And the more I've learned, the more I've worked at it, the more I've realized how little I do actually know. And in the last couple months, I found myself in the valley of despair. And that is the moment you have enough awareness of a subject to know how little you actually do know. It's the first time since you said, I don't know anything, that you recognize how much you do and you don't know. There are some people who never leave the peak of Mount Stupid, and there are some people who never leave the valley of despair. The disillusionment of realizing that you aren't already a master is difficult. I have a favorite quote that I picked up from Mike Merles. I literally have it written like 2 or 3 places around the house to remind me. If you want to become good at something, you must first be very bad at it for quite some time. Mastery has 3 parts: earned experience, practice technique, and a capacity to fail without fear. Whatever you do, you may fail, you may succeed. Either way, it will be a valuable experience. Thus, in a sense, there is no failure, because failure itself is earned experience. Okay, so what happens next? Let me back up. During this last year, I've been on a personal crash course to become a game designer and game developer. As a part of that, I started reading The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. It's a really, really good book. It's validated a lot of things for me. It's taught me a lot of stuff. It's reminded me why I want to make games. I do have to say there are some serious problems with his understanding of gender and games. So, asterisk under his name, unfortunately. But the book is practically the textbook in the creative process of designing and building video games. So, according to Jesse, the core of any game is what he calls the essential experience. And he defines this as the feeling, the emotions, the mindset that the game is trying to impart on the player. What do you want your players to feel? For example, if you've played any of the Hitman games, you know that the essential experience for those games is to feel like an extremely competent and clever assassin. If you've played any of the Arkham games, you know that they're trying to make you feel like Batman. You're not watching Batman, you are Batman. So for Breakout, I think I've broken down the essential experience. I want the player to feel a very calming connection with synthwave music. I'm going to start with that, and it may evolve over time. All the work up to this point has been focused on technical challenges. Can I get the music to sync with visuals? Can I get haptic feedback working? Can I get adaptive music working? The next big step is to create a working prototype of the game's essential experience. One level that makes you feel that calming connection with synthwave music. If I can achieve that, ideally I've proven the viability of this game. If I achieve that and it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't seem like I've hit on the essential experience right, then maybe it's a different essential experience I need to head toward. For the sake of time, I'm going to write the music for this prototype myself. Once I get into full production, though, I don't want to be the only person producing music for this game. I'm going to be reaching out to musicians who may either already have existing music that could be adapted for this game, or would be willing to write music for the game. I have a relatively long list of synthwave musicians I'm interested in contacting, and there are a lot of musicians in synthwave right now. The biggest elephant in the room, though, is the visuals. This is not a beautiful game yet. And I feel like that's a very key component to this game. But before I can even progress to starting into the visuals, I need to decide one big thing, which is this going to be a 2D game or a 3D game? I'm leaning toward 3D, but I don't have a long list of 3D artists I know and have worked with. But if you have a preference, if you have a preference of this being a 2D game or a 3D game, let me know. Put it in the comments. I'll likely consult with the artists I do know on visual themes, general design, and I kind of know that for this first prototype, I may have to pull a lot of the weight regarding 3D design and animation, and that's okay. I'm competent enough. But for now, that's it. That's what I've got. I've reflected on what I had planned since August, what I did since August, what I learned, and what I'm hoping to do next. Guess it's time to get to work.